the IT Army of Ukraine is a volunteer organization of hackers. There's about 10,000 of them. So before the war, Ukraine had a thriving IT sector. And at the outbreak of the war, a lot of the people who were employed in sort of fintech or app development, stuff like that, they wanted to sort of be useful to Ukraine's military effort. And so they decided to set up an organization with some help from the government, although they stress their independence, to basically try and disrupt Russian companies, Russian infrastructure, as what they saw as the best way that they could sort of try and help the Ukrainian effort.
And some of these have caused discomfort for people in Russia. Can you just tell me about some of the successes that they've had and how they chose those targets?
So the IT Army of Ukraine, it's a struggle for them to target military infrastructure because it's pretty well protected, but they can target sort of things that are crucial for the logistics of the Russian army. So that's roads, that's railways, and by sort of disrupting those services in Russia, they're hoping that they can have a military effect. So one recent hack, they targeted the sort of online ticketing service used by the Russian National Railways, took that down. Another one was they sort of interrupted the payment system used for toll booths on the Russian motorway. The idea being that the Russian military would struggle to sort of resupply if it wasn't able to use the roads and the railway networks. But they're also, you know, there's a degree of sort of fun that they take to their hacking approach. You know, there's a bit of humor. So there was one example that really I found quite amusing, which involved them targeting the licensing system used in supermarkets in Russia for meat and dairy products. And the result of that was that basically from some supermarkets in Russia, you know, it was a struggle to resupply milk, and milk started disappearing for a couple of days from the shelves. So that gives you a sense of the slightly sort of funner side of things that they take. I mean, they justify that on the basis that they need to make Russians feel as if they're in a state of war. For many Russians, you know, living in major cities in Russia, there hasn't been a sort of a dramatic change in their in what they can buy in shops, in what music they can listen to, in their daily lives. And by doing these sorts of these hacks, perhaps the less serious ones, another one involved them targeting a sort of petrol station company and sort of stopping them from selling hot dogs and burgers. But this sort of thing is supposed to sort of try and bring the war home to Russia as well, even if it's in, you know, a pretty, you know, it's not going to hurt anyone, put it that way, if they can't buy their burger.
So, as well as military targets, this is disrupting ordinary Russians' lives. Do you think this will have an effect on morale in Russia, or is this something that just gets passed off as a minor inconvenience?
It's a good question. I mean, I also looked for the same article at another project, which was called IT Stand for Ukraine. And that was, rather than hacking ordinary Russians or Russian companies, it was trying to contact Russians over social media and tell them the reality of the war. So it's trying to sort of pierce the bubble of Kremlin propaganda, get past that and speak directly to Russians. And actually they gave up because they found it so dispiriting that they couldn't get through to people. And they targeted people with reason to criticize the war. So that's young men who were about to be conscripted. That was the mothers of Russian soldiers. And yet, despite all their attempts, they found it basically impossible to get through and sort of talk to them about the war. So I think there is some, you know, I don't think these volunteer organizations are kidding themselves that, you know, Vladimir Putin is going to order his troops out because some people can't buy milk in the shops. But it's cumulative, isn't it? It's sort of, it's psychological. It's trying to make the war a problem for ordinary Russians, as in the same way that it is for ordinary Ukrainians.